animals are one of the only animal that I know of other than human beings that will run down and run down and run down and run down and go and go and go after another member of their own species to kill it. Okay.
You could be forgiven for thinking you're watching an investigation into a violent wolf attack. In reality, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation is seeking justice for 24-year-old Meredith Emerson, who vanished while hiking Blood Mountain on New Year's Day 2008. On January 5th, Meredith's bloodied clothing and wallet were uncovered from a dumpster, and an anonymous phone tip warned investigators that
I have the person of interest in that missing woman case. The van is here, the dog is here, the red dog, and I saw the man's face, and I've been watching the news, and I know it's him, And he's emptying all this stuff out of his van, like he is as guilty as sin. Okay. I can go take him down if you want. No, sir, stay right there. Okay.
Within 5 hours, authorities apprehended 62-year-old Gary Hilton, a man with a pervasive belief he is the most interesting element of this investigation.
An alpha female may get up in the morning and kill her mother and run her sister off. That's how savage and brutal the world is. The sex that is the most avaricious, accumulative, greedy, and heartless is women. Son, I'm telling you, I'm an observer, I'm a philosopher, I'm a man of vast experience. I've been a professional beggar for 20 years. That's the artist. Don't you understand? That's the artist in me. Artists don't get up and go to work in the morning. Artists, that's why they call them con artists. I'm a sociopath, man. I'm like what they call an antisocial. That's the new name for it, an antisocial personality. In my day, it was called a sociopathic character disorder.
Gary offers himself as an open book, turning over Meredith's dismembered remains in a deal that would spare him from the death penalty. Despite already securing a confession, investigators have reason to believe Meredith isn't his first victim. Throughout his 120-page statement, the only question Gary refuses to answer is whether he's done this before. He faces off against the GBI once more on February 4th, relishing the opportunity to rant at a captive audience. The GBI agents must discard any sense of human decency to establish an atmosphere of fraternity, bringing to light the full extent of Gary's crimes.
Like I said before, the reason we're here to talk to you, Meredith's been adjudicated.
Hey, I'll help you out on that case because we made a deal.
Yeah, we just want to shore up a few things.
I ran that girl off. You know why?
Is that about the time you and her split?
Yeah. Okay. Within 4 months after we were divorced, I ran her off. I decided, here we got a beautiful girl, made even at that time 25-30% more money than I did even on my good paying staff job. In other words, she made the equivalent of $20 an hour. Mm-hmm. Okay, good grief. Right, perfect house, squeaky clean, you could eat off the damn floor, meals ready, work to boot, gorgeous girl, and really only wanted to do what I wanted to do. And if I didn't want to do anything, she wouldn't like it, but she'd do it if I wanted to sit around and smoke pot or something,
So how many years total were you married to her?
From 68, summer of 68 to summer of 71.
Summer of 71, so 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Did you break it off with her, or did...
I ran her off. Oh, you know why I ran her off? I'm telling you all these qualities she had. Well, remember now, this is a cultural revolution. It's really hitting home. By 1970, everyone was in effect doing the 60s. We had the cultural revolution going on. And I was in college, and even though I wasn't on the teaching staff, it was in a sense the same status almost as being on. You were staff.
You had the best of both worlds.
Oh, yeah. Air conditioning wasn't a blue-collar job, nothing else. It was white shirt and tie and running a learning center or running a distribution center or this and that, supervising 30 student assistants, that kind of thing. Air conditioned, intellectual, that kind of academic atmosphere, right?
Yeah.
And my gripe against her was that she was just empty-headed and didn't have a thought in the world, and she was not sophisticated enough and not intellectual enough. You talk about stupid. Women today have too many thoughts. They have too, you know what I mean? If you could find a woman that's just simple and plain and whatever you want, honey, and here's your food, and I got the house clean, and I'm good looking to boot, and I make more money than you, well, my God.
As the interview progresses, agents let Gary's monologue run on in the hope he'll actually stumble onto something useful. Gary clearly thinks he's a maverick who transcends social norms, so investigators will have to suffer through much more of his freewheeling autobiography. We don't want to put you through that, so we'll go ahead and spare you an hour and a half of his drivel.
Even guys like myself that are just totally sociopathic, we still need some human to trust.
Right.
Even if we're not close to them.
Right.
To trust them, even if it's a business associate. And I chose to trust him, and that's why John Tate.
Yeah.
And that's why I got away with it. You see, it's because when you choose to trust someone, it's kind of a dimming of awareness. And quite often, people find that their spouses really weren't who they themselves made them out to be.
Right.
And they find that their spouses were looking them in the eye for the whole 10 years and saying, "Honey, I love you. There'll never be another one," and sleeping with them and being intimate with them, and the whole time sharing their body and their lives and their emotions with some other woman or some other man. It's an all too common story. It's psychopathic behavior, but everyone does it. Because one of my favorite observations that I've come to learn through my philosophical insight is that personal integrity is so hard to judge because everyone has different degrees of integrity according to what they're doing and who they're doing it with.
When Gary talks about everyone engaging in psychopathic and sociopathic behavior, he's attempting to normalize his own violence and cruelty. If it's acceptable for everyone else to betray and lie to their partners, why should he be persecuted for his transgressions? Despite Gary's many philosophical insights, the fact that he uses the distinct terms psychopath and sociopath interchangeably shows he truly has no idea what he's talking about. He will continue to waffle for another 30 minutes when attention finally falls to his victim.
Didn't you say, I bet that 120-pound girl almost whipped your ass? She almost whipped my ass. She damn sure did. I lost control of both of them, both the knife and the bat. Showed her the knife, grabbed the fucking, it's a bayonet, so it's dull shit anyway. All it is a spike to stick with, it's not a slasher. Grabbed the bayonet, and somehow I lost control of the bayonet and lost it, period, and it went down. I pulled the bat, deployed it, grabbed that. I mean, it was not my finest hour. It was not I'm better than that. I am, but I found out she was a fucking black belt.
While Meredith was a blue belt in the martial art of Aikido and would have been fueled by the adrenaline of a fight to the death, Gary must exaggerate her strength to shield his own ego. Though his breezy tone would suit a story about yelling at a waitress, it masks the intense shame this lone wolf must feel, having almost lost.
She didn't do no shit. It's just that she was real quick with her hands and had no hesitation about grabbing weapons and everything. And not only that, she was hard to subdue. And fought like hell, man. Fought and fought and fought and fought. And then once I gained control over her and got her 10 to 15 feet away from the trail on that little side trail I told you about, she started fighting again. And her doing that is what got me caught. Because if I'd been back to the crime scene, just a few minutes sooner, just several minutes sooner, I would have beat those people that found the bat, and I would have picked it up. But as it was, I had to fight her twice, bring her all the way around the corner of the mountain, and then secure her to a tree, in spite of her protestations, and then go back for it. So she caught me fair and square. But Meredith about got the best of me there. Yeah, she did. Oh, but to ask you a question, once she goes over the edge, I got her around to the tree. And she said, no, don't, but she wasn't yelling anymore. I said, honey, don't worry. Listen, I just got to go back. I'll be right here. Listen. And I said, and also, the first thing I said is, where's your debit cards, credit cards? In the car, and say, what's the PIN number? 1224. Okay, look, honey, look. I got your credit card, I got your PIN number, it's going to hurt you, I'll be back just a second. Just take it. And she just calmed right down. And from then on, she was just cooperating. She was unsecured, totally unsecured, except just I put a loop line around her neck. And just like a leash, like a dog's leash. And that's the only way she was secured, okay. And I told her that I had a gun and that, I was just going to shoot her ass. Now, I didn't have a gun, but I had this BB pistol that looked like a gun, and I was going to shoot her ass down. And, she took off running. something. You know, because you got to do that because most girls can probably outrun me. You know, not that fast. And after that, from then on, she totally cooperated. We traversed the Blood Mountain through the stick stuff, down through the drainage, up. And she was totally cooperative with me and everything else. And it was all the way through. And as time went on, she got more and more cooperative.
At odds with Gary's description of her compliance, Meredith kept feeding him incorrect PIN numbers to buy time, and likely as a Hail Mary attempt to alert authorities. Tragedy lies in the fact this ploy came so close to saving her. Gary kept Meredith alive for 4 days, zip-tying her to a tree while she sent him on a wild goose chase of false PIN numbers. It wasn't until January 4th, when Gary told Meredith she could finally go home, that he walked behind her and struck her head with an iron jack handle. Gary reminisces about fooling Meredith into believing he would release her unharmed, proud of outwitting such a capable person. But in doing so reveals he was forced to rely on trickery to maintain control. For Gary, this defeat is even more humiliating, having been at the hands of a woman. And he elaborates on his misogyny following a conversation about his third ex-wife.
Oh, that's the way it always is. Don't you know that? If you're going with someone, sooner or later, and it's typically the chick because she's the one that's got the pussy and can fuck anytime she wants, sooner or later it comes around to all the people I've fucked. It always ends up that way. Don't you know that? Yeah, sure. Anytime you have a relationship, you can go with someone that sooner or later is who else have you fucked, and almost invariably, at least with the chicks I go with, they want to tell you, you know. And the reason why,
Obviously, I missed out on an important part of the conversation.
I mean, and the reason why is that you see, and there's a fine distinction, for women to threaten to give it away, that pussy, I mean, and for them to let you know that they could give it away, and they have given it away, increases the value of it. However, it's marketing. But a sophisticated woman understands that to threaten to give it away increases the value, and actually giving it away to someone else decreases the value. And some women aren't smart enough to know the difference, and they fuck up that way.
Was that Sue, or?
They all do that. They all do that. You know how they do it? You know, the nice girls do. Are you married?
Yeah.
Okay. The nice girls, you know how they do it? They say, either you marry me or forget about it, I'm going to find someone else. That's the threatening to give it away. That is what it is, okay? And that's how they get men to do what they want them to do.
Oh, yeah.
Always, yeah. Either you do what I want, or in the end, I'm going to give it to someone else. Yeah. And you see, that part of my dislike, or I wouldn't call it hatred, but almost, for women is that they have all the advantages. They got
the deck is stacked against us.
I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you. And so I finally came to the conclusion, I mean, the last piece of ass I had, except for rape here, was in '89. Was in January of '89. And I never...
You kind of dropped out of the game there.
I was never so happy.
In Gary's mind, a woman's consent is a non-factor. So he has no issue equating an extreme act of violence and a consensual encounter. The agents must play along. They've been involved in the search for Meredith while there was hope she was still alive. And one can only imagine how difficult it would be for them to remain neutral here, let alone laugh along. They must bury that emotional investment, mentioning their own wives and making their own jokes in the hopes they can find justice for Meredith and any victims that yet remain hidden.
Hey, listen, how many little 9-year-old boys have said to the little girls, oh, you know, I would like you to get your toy tea set out, and let's have a tea, and let's get our dollies here and have tea with our dolly. You've never seen a boy do that. But that's what a woman wants you to do as an adult, is to play house, okay, and to have children. How many 9-year-old boys, now, don't get me wrong, I understand that for many men, having children is the greatest thing in their life, but nevertheless, how many 9-year-old boys have you known that have said, oh, you know, I don't want to be a soldier, a pilot, or an astronaut, I want to grow up and have a family. Bullshit, okay? That's not what men are about. Okay? But in the end, puberty happens, the hormones rise, we start getting led around by our
You
day.
get that tax break, all that
And
stuff.
in the end, we become women. You look at any married couple, virtually. When I say any, that's a big word, but, virtually any married couple, especially the older ones. And what you have is not a man and a woman. You have two women. And one of them has a penis. And he's the designated dick, It's like, honey, can you give me my dick back tonight, And you have two women doing the things that a woman wants to do and having the values that a woman has and leading a woman's agenda with the so-called man given permission to do symbolic, almost ritual things that make him the man. It may be whatever. It may be having his collection of Snap-on tools in the garage. It may be his Harley Davidson. It could be his fishing or his hunting. These are symbolic, ritualistic things that they're allowed to do to say they're the men. That's why we're in the condition we're in. Don't ever forget this. You don't be fooled by a woman's nurturing instinct. Look at their free will personalities, and you're going to find women are the most hateful, avaricious, accumulative, greedy, and heartless. Women are what got us in this situation we're in, man. The reason why is, what do women want? The two things. They want their home and kids. Women wanted their things. They wanted their pottery. They wanted their homes. They wanted to settle down. So what happened? At the end of the last ice age, the Pleistocene megafauna, the great big-ass animals, went extinct. Women used that to get men to start planting seeds and grubbing in the earth like animals, okay? And once they got them settled down on the farm, then what happened is, ecological disaster. They destroyed, men have never lived, agricultural people have never lived in harmony with nature. What they had to do was move out of the Anatolian plateau in Turkey, in northern Iraq and Iran, and they had to move down into the river valleys of Mesopotamia, the Tigris and the Euphrates, ditto with the Nile. Once they moved down into those valleys, desert there, water there, irrigation, then the state was able to assume control by getting them in a hydraulic trap of these giant irrigation projects, which they did, dams, canals, everything. And once the state got control of the water, they had control of the people. And after that, humanity descended into degradation.
But you see that in the women of today now, as far as the same type of traits that you...
Son, I'm telling you, I'm an observer, I'm a philosopher, I'm a man of vast experience.
You're an artist.
I've been a professional beggar for 20 years. And I'm going to tell you, who has the biggest heart? It's going to be men.
Really?
You're fooled by a woman's nurturing instincts and her softness, but a woman isn't soft. It's the difference in our personalities. Men tend to be more confrontational and grab the whole thing, while women affect an air of softness and get it a bit at a time.
Almost manipulative, you mean?
Much more so. And I always remember, they got the pussy. We're fucked.
Gary punctuates his diatribe on human history with rhetorical questions, dramatic gestures, and warnings not to forget or be fooled, like a pastor delivering a sermon. It's not exactly a stretch to connect Meredith's murder to his stance that women cause literally every problem ever. And this radicalism supports the concern that Gary has other victims. Serial killer profiling identifies 4 broad categories of motive: visionary, power and control, hedonistic, and mission-oriented. Gary echoes the last of these. Mission-oriented or pragmatic mission killers are driven by hatred and vengeance, targeting a specific group of people they see as a blight on society. For someone like Ted Kaczynski, who took 3 lives with homemade bombs, these targets were academics he blamed for the destruction of the environment. For Gary, it would seem to be women. These categories and Gary's place within them are imperfect, as he lacks the organization and efficiency of other missionary killers. But that isn't going to stop Gary comparing his own prospects to the murderers he so clearly idolizes.
They're going to send me to Supermax. I just know they are. Huh? What about it? They sent Ted Kaczynski there. All the notorious people. Listen, Rudolph went there and he only killed one person. I mean, you could say a criminal is someone that breaks the law, gets away with it, and keeps doing it until he gets caught. That's a good definition. But another good definition is one that can't get up and go to work in the morning. That's the artist. Don't you understand? That's the artist in me. Artists don't get up and go to work in the morning. Artists, that's why they call them con artists. Yeah, but it's dreadful. There was no pleasure or anything else. And one may say, well, you're the one that chose to make money by killing. There's other ways to make money. There's bank robbery and so forth. Well, you know, in retrospect, I regret not attempting a bank robbery. I really do. Because all of this shit got me nowhere but caught. Okay? And so I might have been caught robbing a bank. But if I'd have scored, if I'd have got $5,000, I could live off that for over half a year in the woods, you know. And so yeah. But as to why I chose to kill for money, that was, part of that was rage against society, sociopathic rage against society.
Let me ask you this, and you know, there again, we're here to I don't know.
Anyway, I
Better
promised
prepare
you,
ourselves.
when we did a deal, I promised you cooperation. And by all rights, I shouldn't be talking to you. My attorney's warned me a million times, don't talk to no one without an attorney. But I'm not telling you nothing that, you know what I mean?
Right.
We're talking about history.
Right.
And I was going to save the history for the profilers, but they'll be psychologists and psychiatrists, so they'll want to go with that. Well, you were a little rough on me the first night, but I don't blame you. I don't blame you. You might have had a live girl on your hands for all you knew. You're either going to kill her or get caught. There's no other solution. It's not that, you know. And that sounds cold and cruel. Yeah, it was. It's the soldier in me.
Mm-hmm.
A soldier doesn't wonder why. He just does or dies. Okay.
I was about to say, that's part of the, I guess, the operations order there. You know?
Yes, and I'm trying to impress on you, though, it was nothing sexual or pleasurable.
Well, you talk about being a pro.
It was dreadful. It was dreadful. You asked, wasn't it you that asked me what's it like to cut someone's head off?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It was dreadful, and the only thing you can do is so dreadful that the only thing you can do is go on autopilot. I told you it wasn't real.
Right.
Okay. That's all you
Yeah,
can do.
you said it was surreal. It was out of
Yeah,
body
it's so dreadful.
Mm-hmm.
It's so fucking dreadful that all you can do is do your duty and go on autopilot. It's the same as combat soldiers that told me from Vietnam. They told me the same thing. They'd see bodies, you know, with guts, you know, roped all over the place, heads blown off, and it wasn't real. It just didn't look real.
Gary is so committed to his mission against society, or duty, as he just put it, that he equates murdering an innocent hiker to the fog of war. Gary did in fact serve as a paratrooper in West Germany from 1964 until 1967, but military records and Gary himself confirm he never saw combat. We're sure you don't need reminding that most of what leaves his mouth is hot air. But this appropriation of military trauma exposes that there's truly no one worthy of respect or empathy in Gary's mind, not even a veteran. The GBI agents are dealing with an ego the size of the Appalachians themselves. But fortunately for them, Gary's self-aggrandizing blinds him to the fact they don't actually care about his manifesto. Just as Gary stalked Meredith, they lie in wait for a slip-up, and they're about to find what they're looking for.
Now, one thing I didn't ask you about this, since you're on that point, one thing I didn't ask you about, did you have to put something to keep her quiet, a gag, so to speak, or anything like that?
No.
Was she unconscious at that point?
Never.
Well, I'm wondering why she wasn't yelling when you zip tied her to a tree, and when you went back to clean the crime scene, is what I'm getting at.
There comes a point, they fight, and then they submit.
Right.
And a lot of it is because of me.
Right.
I reassure them. That it's going to be okay, but just quit fighting or you're going to get hurt. I tell them, listen, honey, I'm going to spend life in prison just because you said no. I'm calm as can be. I'm a very experienced fighter. You know, the thing that separates a martial artist from a brawler, there's three things. One is the martial artist has the footwork. Secondly, the martial artist is not willing to lose. And thirdly, And very importantly, I learned this from the police, a martial artist doesn't get mad. Okay. If a cop is getting mad when he's fighting, then he's doomed. Okay. And the martial artist doesn't get mad. The martial artist stays calm because the martial artist has confidence in his proficiency. And
Not
paradoxically,
professionalism, but
it is. Paradoxically, the better you are in fighting, the less you have to hurt people. But you know, the advice to people if they're abducted is to engage your abductor and to make yourself a person to them and not have them think of you as an object. To engage them, to tell them your name, to tell them about yourself, tell them about your family, tell them about tell your abductor that, you know, tell them what you study, what your dreams and hopes and plans and schemes are, and try to engage them and make yourself a person rather than an object, because the abductor is psychopathic. He's looking at you in a human way. You want to make yourself a human. No. It was always me. It was always me engaging them. First thing I ask them is, what kind of music you like? What's your favorite song? What do you do for work? Where'd you go to school? What do you like to do? And talk to them. It calms them down. But none of them ever did that to me. Meredith, the whole time, I knew her thing because I knew her name, I saw it in the license, but I just called her Honey, you know. I said, come on, hon, come on, let's go. Gotta do it, come on, no, no, come on, yeah, that kind of thing. She never once told me, hey, my name is Meredith.
Though Gary tries to refocus his answers on Meredith, he speaks in the plural. They fight, and they submit. It was always me engaging them. The ease with which he rattles off mistakes he never makes and questions he always asks banishes any doubt Gary has killed before. If he'd managed to slip through the GBI's fingers this time around, the body count could have reached double digits. Only 2 months prior to this interrogation, in a familiar story, Gary attacked elderly couple John and Irene Bryant while they were hiking in the Pisgah National Forest. He bludgeoned Irene to death on the spot and kidnapped John, forcing him to reveal his banking details. He later shot John in the head and dumped his body in the woods. Just a month later, in December, Gary ended up in Apalachicola National Forest, where he found his next victim, 46-year-old nurse Cheryl Dunlap, who he also robbed and killed. He held her captive for 2 days before decapitating her, severing her hands and burying them, in the hopes Cheryl would forever remain a Jane Doe. While it was his late 2007, early 2008 spree that led to Gary's arrest, his systematic MO speaks to escalation over a far longer time frame. Criminologist Eric Hickey warns Gary was likely responsible for other homicides before 2007, a claim supported by other veteran profilers who were skeptical that he had begun killing at such an old age. To this day, Gary remains a suspect in at least 5 other unsolved murders between 1997 and 2007. Whether his victims number 4 or 40, Gary knew a confession was the only way to dodge the death penalty, though his logic, even here, reeks of delusion.
I gave the girl's body up when I realized that I had been caught fair and square. That's what I told you, because they had me on the kidnapping, and it was going to stick. The evidence was good. Right out of the dumpster. It was just a smoking gun. They had me. And on the kidnapping charge, it's the same as a life sentence for me. It's either 30 years for first degree or life with bodily harm. So I was getting a life sentence, and they had that. And so there was no real use in keeping the girl's body except not to be charged with murder and everything. And I did it under those things because they had me, and I did it for the girl's family.
Right.
Okay. The point I'm trying to make is I gave the girl's body up.
Gary may have bargained his way out of true justice for Meredith, but by October 2009, authorities were able to charge him for the murder of Cheryl Dunlap. On February 22, 2011, Gary was sentenced to death. Though it's a victory that rings hollow. In the words of GBI agent Clay Bridges, Meredith was doing everything she was supposed to do to stay alive, And we didn't get there in time. 12 years after her death, lead investigator John Cagle was still so moved by Meredith's case, he published a book around her courageous fight to survive. Her public obituary reinforces the opinions of authorities, with countless pledges from her friends and members of the public to never forget Meredith's bravery every time they venture out on a hike in the wilderness. Cheryl Dunlap was a nurse who gave up her time for such community-minded pursuits as volunteering for Pensacola relief efforts following Hurricane Ivan. She is greatly missed by her 2 sons and 2 granddaughters. From former classmates to friends to strangers moved by her case, Cheryl's obituary is littered with mentions of her smile and her kind, fun-loving nature. John and Irene Bryant had 4 children and 11 grandchildren. They have been lovingly described by family and friends as avid gardeners, cooks, travelers, and hikers. Their son, Robert, told local media that he and his family cherished memories of John and Irene through photographs and stories. He went on to describe his parents as people with lots of integrity who were well-liked by the people who loved and knew them for their intelligence, fun-loving nature, humor, and kindness.